deafening. Deafening? I'm not sure it's deafening.
Does this happen every day?
Every day they do it.
Every day.
No matter what.
Thank you all for joining us here today. Every day here at the Grand Hotel, we celebrate freedom and honor our military, both past and present. The Grand Hotel opened in 1847 and has been close to the military throughout its history. During the Civil War, it served as a Confederate hospital and treated many of the soldiers who were injured in the Civil War and the fighting that was going on up north. This also served as a strategic defensive point for the port of Mobile Bay. Any ship that was going through Mobile Bay would pass by Point Clear, which is this point over here, and they could easily be fired upon from the cannons they had stationed here. Even though this wasn't a hospital, they did have cannon emplacements along the shore. Admiral Farragut, a Union admiral, came into Mobile Bay to try to stifle the Confederate trade lines that were coming out of the port of Mobile Bay. Admiral Farragut had set up a blockade out in the Gulf of Mexico, but the Confederacy had many blockade runners, which were very shallow draft boats that could go very close to the shore. They were faster than the Union gunboats. They were able to outrun them. They were able to get some supplies through the blockade, even though it was rigorously patrolled by their gunships. But Admiral Farragut, he wanted to attack the source, which was the port of Mobile Bay. It was one of the last Confederate oil ports that were still open during the Civil War. He had to get by two forts, Fort Morgan and Fort Gaines. Both of them had crossing lines of fire, so any ship that was passing through the mouth of Mobile Bay could be fired upon from either side. There were also three staggered rows of torpedoes, or what we today call mines, that were in the water under the surface, and he didn't know about those. He actually lost one of his ships, the Tecumseh, to one of those underwater mines. After losing his ship, he gave the famous line, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead," and he sent the rest of his fleet through the minefield. Luckily for him, they had become saturated with salt water, and they had become rendered useless because of black powder's useless when it's wet. But he did effectively get through the mouth of Mobile Bay. He anchored his ships out in the channel and was able to row his troops ashore on the eastern shore and actually march around. He eventually took over the port of Mobile Bay by land, and that weakened this area, and it was eventually taken over by the Union, so it was occupied by the Union. This is at the very end of the Civil War. But this area, about 80 years later, after we won the Civil War, this served as a a U.S. training facility for U.S. Army Air Corps in what they called Operation Ivory Soap. It was a training facility to train them in just basic marine knowledge that they would need to know. In the Pacific theater, it was largely an island hopping campaign. They would have to deal with a lot of water, and so they needed to know those marine skills. Well, one of the most important skills that they learned was how to build airstrips. And they would jigsaw puzzle these pieces, these pre-built pieces of airstrips together very rapidly so that the enemy intelligence could not catch up to the fact they had an airstrip. And they would launch a surprise bombing mission from that airstrip and bomb the defenses on the island before they had a chance to prepare. This was a very effective strategy and gave them a huge tactical advantage in the Pacific theater in World War II, and it was taught here at this hotel. It also trained them in just general maneuvering and stuff, and lifeboats and that kind of thing. But I'm sure you all came out to see the cannon go off, so I'm going to go ahead and load and fire it for you guys. But this is a 6-pounder bronze cannon. It was a very effective cannon. It was left over from the Mexican War. It's in 1841, so it was about 20 years old at the time of the Civil War. Do we have any of the loading equipment and everything? All right. excuse me, we have to be patient. We don't have any of the loading materials, so we can't really fire without powder. Do you all have any questions while we're waiting?